Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. Today, I'm delighted to talk to Professor Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. In recent days, the world has witnessed shocking scenes of Israeli occupation forces storming the Masjid Al-Aqsa in occupied East Jerusalem. We've all seen violent attacks where Israeli forces entered Al-Aqsa using stun grenades, tear gas, and brutally beating Palestinian worshippers. What are we to make of all this? Inshallah, we're going to look at the wider context, the big picture. How is this place viewed in its Islamic perspective? The Quran, Hadith, and the Islamic tradition. Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway is the first holder of the integral chair for the study of Imam Ghazali's work at the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque and at Al-Quds University. He was Dean, College of Dawah and Usul al-Din, and College of the Quran and Islamic Studies, Al-Quds University, from 2014 to 2020. He is also a member of the Islamic Waqf Council in Jerusalem and member of the Hashemite Fund for the Restoration of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. He's also been a professor and Islamic Studies, professor of philosophy and Islamic Studies at Al-Quds University, Jerusalem, Palestine, since 1996. So, sir, can you introduce us to the extraordinary story of Al-Aqsa Mosque?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Al-Aqsa Mosque, to begin with, is situated in, of course, in the old city, eastern corner of the old city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the Holy Land, Palestine. But let's avoid geopolitical maps, because Holiness does not really follow the geopolitical map per se. So it does not wiggle, it does not stop at checkpoints, it does not get stopped by separation walls and what have you. So there's a Holy Land, and the notion of holiness in the first place, that's the largest picture, is that the whole globe is a masjid in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The whole globe is one big mosque. It doesn't mean that the globe has a minaret, but it's a pure place where we can pray. It is full with the signs that point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose specific places. We cannot, as Muslims, add holiness. We cannot choose extra places today. The way we have it, we have 4 holy places only in Islam. We have the Haram in Mecca. And of course, we have the mosque in Mecca built on part of the Haram. The Haram, it's that area where you cannot basically enter it without, if your intention is for Hajj or Umrah, that's basically where should you declare the intention for Ihram and what have you. And the Prophet ﷺ also declared the Haram between 2 hilly areas in Medina itself. And we have in the story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, like the burning bush story, that valley where it took place is described in the Quran as the holy valley, Al-Wadi al-Muqaddas, Tuwa, Al-Wadi al-Muqaddas. We don't know. This is Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam returning from Madian after 8 or 10 years. The idea is that we don't know where is that holy valley. We are not required to look for it, and there are no forms of worship associated with that. And then, of course, Al-Aqsa Mosque. The holiness of the land. Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Prophet Moses asked his followers, believers, all of them, all the followers of all prophets at all times, were monotheists, were Muslims in the broader sense, submitting to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَا قَوْمِ ادْخُلُوا الْأَرْضَ الْمُقَدَّسَةَ الَّتِي كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Of course, he was addressing them qua believers, not qua ethnicity or a cultural group. The notion of blessedness, that this is a blessed land, several times in the Quran. One of them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Sayyidina Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham alayhi salam, and Prophet Lot alayhi salam. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا لِلْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. What's remarkable about this particular verse, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved, rescued Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Lut, to the land that we have blessed for the nations. That is, at the end of nations, is reflects the pluralistic Islamic worldview. We have never been exclusivist, and we'll get to Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab and the Pact of Umar momentarily, inshallah. So it's a blessed land, it's a holy land. Jerusalem itself, of course, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned several traditions. We cannot go over all of these. I have on academia.edu, I have almost 30, I translated almost 30 traditions that are related to Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque. In one hadith, Sayyidina Abi Dharr al-Ghafari, the great companion, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Abi Dharr al-Ghafari asked the Prophet ﷺ about which mosque was established first on earth. And the Prophet ﷺ said the mosque in Mecca. And this is, of course, the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam and Sayyidina Ismail. We'll get back, inshallah, to this. And then Abu Dharr al-Ghifari asked the Prophet, then which mosque? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. He used Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And he asked how many years were between them. He said 40 years. And of course, one can speak about either the original choice by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Scholars debated the 40 years between Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam and home, but at any rate, the idea there is that these are chosen places. And with the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, Sayyidina Ismail, of course, we know that in the everything that we do during Hajj in Mecca pertains to the family of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nothing about Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So, for example, when we offer the offering, that it commemorates the story of Ismail. But Ismail alayhi salam was not mentioned in the Quran within that story of the sacrifice by name. How do we know that it is Ismail? I think it's very important, because the biblical story speaks about Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ishaq. So it's Abraham and Isaac. So how come we say that it is Ismail alayhi salam? We know this because when the angels on their way to the people of Lot, of course, they were bringing really great punishment to them. So on their way, they brought glad tidings to the family of Abraham alayhi salam, precisely because Sarah was barren. She could not basically bear children. Now the glad tidings were that she will have a child, and this child, his name is Isaac, Ishaq. And she was really at a very old age. And not only the glad tidings was about a son, also it was about a grandson whose name is Jacob. وَمِن وَرَاءِ إِسْحَاقَ يَعْقُوبَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guaranteed that this family, this part of the family, Sarah particularly, will have a son, will have a grandson, okay? Which means that this son, Isaac, will grow old enough to get married. So there could be no test with Sayyidina Ishaq. We do not differentiate theologically between the prophets in terms of belief. In fact, the Quran does not have any tension between Ismail and Ishaq. And Sarah and Hagar do not show up as characters where there is tension. For example, the biblical narrative, Sarah would say that the son of Hagar would not inherit with my son. So she wants Sayyidina Ibrahim to get rid of him. So it's really Mecca rather than Jerusalem. It's Ishmael rather than Isaac. And it's a very, very important story. But I think also there is a moral behind the story of the sacrifice is stop human sacrifices. Okay, that's really also part of the story. Now, there's another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he invited Muslims to initiate travel for extra meritorious holy places to the mosque in Mecca, to the mosque in Medina, and to Al-Aqsa mosque. And it doesn't mean that we don't visit other places. I love to visit, for example, the mosque in Istanbul and other places. I can, but they are not extra meritorious the way we have these three locations. Of course, the night journey in itself, we'll get to the another hadith at least, but the night journey itself. Of course, we talk about that first verse of Surah Al-Isra, chapter 17. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله نريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his servant from the noble sanctuary Al-Masjid Haram, which is in Mecca. Mecca is not mentioned, to the Al-Aqsa mosque, of course, in Jerusalem. Muslim scholars have never debated, that the noble sanctuary Al-Masjid Haram is in Mecca and Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is in Jerusalem. And it was a sign. It was during the year of sadness in which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost his two most important supporters, his own wife, Lady Khadija radhiallahu anha, and his uncle Abu Talib, who really defended him against the Meccan idolaters. At any rate, it was a location where you could definitely, it was a place where the Prophet ﷺ will be relieved, definitely, and this is why I would say now, those who have hard time, they have faced difficult time in their life, they, rather than going to Disney, just come to these beautiful places, and you will have relief, and you will enjoy it, and you'll go home. I usually say also you'll go home like ambassador of goodwill on behalf of Al-Aqsa mosque. The mosques are, they have this special organic relationship always, a twinship in the language of today. Today they have twinships between cities, across countries. This way we have a twinship between Masjid Haram in Mecca and Masjid Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. A hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Lady Maymuna radhiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet ﷺ, Aftina fi Bayt al-Maqdis, tell us about our, meaning the Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah. What's our relationship with Jerusalem, with Bayt al-Maqdis? And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, alluded to the end of time scenarios, eschatological notions, that it's going to be the land of gathering and resurrection. And he mentioned that the extra meritorious nature of the prayer, that if you pray here, it's it's multiplied. And he used grammatically imperative language, ituhu fasallu fih, go there, go and pray there. So it's imperative. I would not say it's a fard, but the language is imperative, definitely. And she exclaimed about those who cannot make it because of whatever reason. Those who cannot make it today, they cannot make it because they don't have money, they cannot make it, they are sick, they cannot make it because of they don't have the visas, the occupation prevents them, or whatever is the case. The Prophet ﷺ said they can send a gift of oil to be burnt in its lanterns. This gift of oil, so I understand this hadith, these two particular issues, the prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque and the gift of oil, to be speaking about two issues. One, spiritual, the spiritual relationship with Al-Aqsa Mosque. You come here, you pray, you come here, and whatever dhikr, whatever recitation of the Quran. But also Al-Aqsa Mosque has something special that no other mosque has. If you initiate a minor pilgrimage, the Umrah, from Al-Aqsa Mosque towards Mecca, then it's tantamount in terms of its blessings, reward, tantamount to full Hajj. It does not really relieve you from the obligation of Hajj, but the reward, divine reward. In fact, just about an hour ago or so, after I prayed the noon prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque, and I left the mosque, I met someone from, I think, from Europe. he told me that he will be traveling today from Al-Aqsa Mosque from Jerusalem to Mecca because of this particular hadith.
Wow.
So praying at Al-Aqsa Mosque, we understand the gift of oil, taking care of Al-Aqsa Mosque. This brings us to two things. One of them, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was taken from Mecca to Jerusalem, from the noble sanctuary to Al-Aqsa Mosque, what we had in Jerusalem, we have the space of Al-Aqsa Mosque, like the Haram in Mecca. The building is one thing.
Right.
And the first Muslim building was built by Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab around 636 when Muslims conquered Jerusalem. And the full development, at least the major development of that space took place at the hands of the Umayyad dynasty by the end of the 7th century, practically around 695. We already have the Dome of the Rock, we already have the Qibli, the southernmost building, which suffered several times from earthquakes historically. Mujir al-Hanbali, who literally died 500 years ago, said about the definition of Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's the space, and immediately within the same context of his book on the history of Jerusalem and Hebron, Al-Uns al-Jalil, في تاريخ القدس والخليل, he said that he measured the length of the mosque from the northern wall to the southern wall twice, and from the eastern wall to the western wall twice, and he mentioned that from the eastern wall from Bab al-Rahmah, which basically translates into the Gate of Mercy. In English, it is famous as the Golden Gate, all the way to the Tankaziyya School in the west. Part of the Tankaziyya School is above the western corridor of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and part of it is in the old city near the gate of the chain. So when he specified what Al-Aqsa Mosque is, he said that it is the whole space, and there was no Zionism, there was no Israel, there was no we don't contest as Muslims. The fact is that it is a mosque. It has been a mosque in the hands of Muslims. It has been a mosque for 1500 years, like 15 centuries. We have just mentioned.
Can I just, sorry, Dr. Can I just pause you there just to clarify one thing? In many people's mind, in fact, in my mind, until I was corrected, I thought the Dome of the Rock was Al-Aqsa. And sometimes in the media, you get this extraordinary ancient building with this golden dome. But of course, that's not, the Dome of the Rock isn't Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's a separate building, but often confused, isn't it, in many people's mind, perhaps in the West. I don't know if it's just here, but
I think there was once a Muslim scholar, a prominent Muslim scholar, speaking about Al-Aqsa Mosque, and he got mixed up.
Really?
Between what's the relation? The Dome of the Rock is part of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Right. Anything on this surface is part of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Anything beneath subterranean halls like Al-Marwani, it can accommodate several thousand people. And in fact, right now we have people who are doing i'tikaf. I hope that we have a chance to speak about i'tikaf.
I want to come back to that very concept, by the way, later.
So right now we have people who are doing i'tikaf. They stay in Al-Marwani. It's a massive subterranean hall, beautiful. So we have subterranean halls. They call it sometimes the ancient Al-Aqsa, the corridors that lead to the Umayyad palaces, south of the old city. We have several subterranean halls. So anything above, anything below, the airspace, all of it is part of Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Al-Aqsa Mosque is actually quite a substantial geographical, physical area, which includes the Dome of the Rock, but it also includes Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is actually a separate building where people pray as well.
Then we probably are talking about the Qibli. The Qibli,
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes they speak to it as about the Al-Aqsa. So if we do speak about the southernmost building, it's the Qibli. I remember that when Lieberman, the Israeli foreign minister, when he was foreign minister, he sent an A4, like a letter to the embassies in Tel Aviv, telling them that Al-Aqsa Mosque is only the southernmost building, so that Israel will have free hand in terms of the courtyards. Every single major mosque of in the history of Islam had a courtyard. Mecca has courtyards. between the Kaaba and the building, there is a courtyard where we make tawaf usually, but of course you can do it inside the building above the above floors. The Umayyad Mosque in Damascus has a courtyard. The mosque of the Prophet ﷺ has a courtyard. Even the Blue Mosque, Sultan Ahmed Mosque, has a courtyard. And this is why
Regent's Park Mosque here in London has a courtyard as well.
Exactly. Even I've been there.
Obviously, nothing as amazingly distinguished as the mosque you're talking about.
Exactly. So
part of the mosque compound, the area, the complex of the mosque itself. It's not some kind of extra thing added on. It's part of the mosque. Yeah.
Sometimes we had even to mention the area. It's the all 144,000 square meters, 144 dunams. A little bit more than 36 acres. It's the whole area, including the walls themselves. So the walls themselves are part of the mosque.
Walls themselves. So just to clarify, when we saw those shocking scenes on social media, we all did, of Israeli occupation forces storming Masjid Al-Aqsa recently, what part of that complex were they physically invading then and beating everyone? And where was that exactly?
Okay, that's part of the Qibli mosque. In the southernmost part of that's pretty much where Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab built his the original building before the Umayyads developed the whole area. So they entered before dawn. They entered through the clinic. They damaged the clinic, damaged the wall, and attacked people with
unbelievable savagery. I mean, it wasn't even there was no pretense. I mean, cameras were there. There's no pretense of being law and order abiding. They were brutal and quite shocking to watch. And the whole world, I'm glad to say, in a way, saw this, witnessed.
They saw all of this. I mean, the image in my mind goes back always to that young woman who had a light colored, could be a white scarf, and it was full with blood. There were, absolutely, it is barbaric, and it does expose the nature of there are no benign occupations, there are no benign colonial powers. So that's exactly the place where, but that's not the only place where, the attacks on the worshippers take place. Sometimes really in the middle of the courtyards, there is also a videotape where they broke a congregational prayers in the courtyard in front of the Qibli. Journalists were attacked. Journalists who literally got broken hands, their cameras damaged, name it, elderly people, women dragged. There is no, they have no limit to what they could do at.
There is an agreement, is there not? I mean, the king of Jordan, the Jordanian king, and the dynasty there has the status quo is that they're supposed to be administering and protecting and so on, that whole compound, not the occupation force, the Israeli occupation force, who are now mustering in and saying, taking it over. There's actually a Jordanian responsibility, is that right, legally?
It's true. In fact, that part of Maimuna's tradition about the gift of oil, which translates into maintenance, taking care of the mosque, beginning with Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, different dynasties, the Mamluk, the Ottoman Empire for some 400 years, and for the last century it has been the Hashemites since the time of the in fact Sharif al-Hussein bin Ali. He donated a very large sum of money for the maintenance of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it's a story of 100 years. In fact, in a different sense, a little bit more than 100 years of Hashemite custodianship, and not only the Muslim holy places in Jerusalem, both Islamic and Christian holy places.
Well, that's an important point to make. It's not just a Muslim concern or interest; it's also a Christian concern that the Hashemite, the Jordanian king, has a responsibility to care and protect and maintain that particular area.
In fact, His Majesty made donation for the renovation of the Holy Sepulchre Church. So this is not, and this is not the most important thing that the Hashemites are doing. When it was time to fight, they fought. So the Jordanian army defended Jerusalem, and this is why it was did not fall under occupation in 1948. And today it's diplomacy, UNESCO. This is why we have the official name of Al-Aqsa Mosque at the UNESCO is Al-Aqsa Mosque / Al-Haram Al-Sharif. Jordan continues to be the address really for us, both Christian heads of churches and Muslim scholars, the Waqf Council.
Just to pause there, sorry, the United Nations, you mentioned UNESCO, United Nations recognizes the Jordanian responsibility for the custodian of that place as well.
Yes, the United Nations does. The White House does. The Secretary of State recognized His Majesty as the custodian of both Muslim and Christian holy places. This is very, very important. Of course, on the ground, we have the Waqf department, the Islamic Waqf department, about 1,000 employees who are taking care of everything within Al-Aqsa Mosque and beyond. They take care of about 120 mosques in Jerusalem, about 50 schools. But suffice it to say that anything, the support of His Majesty is unlimited, and definitely the support for the sanctity of the mosque, for the historical status quo, and this is what we should all do. And really the Arab and Muslim world, but I would say slowly the world is realized basically the need for support for the historical status quo, because as Archbishop Hussam Naum, Archbishop of the Anglican Church in the region, not only in Jerusalem and Palestine, he said that the custodianship of His Majesty is a safety valve, really, so the region would continue to enjoy peace and security if it is respected. And of course, all of this is important, but the elephant of the room is the Israeli occupation, and there are ample UN resolutions that address this particular issue.
Can we just go back to, you mentioned the Archbishop there in the Anglican Church. What about Christian holy places in the occupied Jerusalem? Have there been attacks on them recently? Because the focus perhaps has been much more on the brutal storming of Masjid Al-Aqsa. But what about the Christian holy places in that part of Jerusalem as well?
Most recently, about a month ago, the Archbishop Hussam Naum, myself, and Judge Mohammed Sarandah and Father Ibrahim Azar from Jordan, we came to London. Really, we were arranged by the Jordanian embassy in London. We went from Islamic centers to Christian churches, to the parliament, to the foreign office, meeting with the diplomatic corps, etc. We were carrying the story of both of us, meaning Christians and Muslims, and what our holy places are facing. And lately, we have an attack on the Church of Flagellation in the Old City. We have an attack outside the Old City near the Church of the Gethsemane, on the foot of Mount of Olives, the Church of the Virgin Mary. There was another attack, and in both cases we talk about an extremist Jewish fellow, and in both cases it was a Muslim man who stopped the attacker in both churches.
Can I just kind of, when you say attack, what happened? I mean, was there a physical assault on the building, or the worshippers, the Christian worshippers, or what happened?
Okay, in the Church Flagellation, it was an attack on a statue of Jesus Christ, peace upon him. As Muslims, we don't really, but it's really, we respect these holy places, and we should really speak about the Pact of Umar. I think this is very important, because for more than 1400 years, we have been respecting this relationship between us So it was an attack physically in the church flagellation on the artifacts, in the Church of the Virgin Mary outside the Old City, outside the Lion's Gate in the valley and on the foothill of the Mount of Olives. It was an attack on both, and there was a priest, leading a mass or something, and there was an attack, and there were two, but one of them was caught by this Muslim vendor who was nearby.
So Muslims are coming to the defense of Christian holy places when they've been attacked by Israeli extremists who are seeking to, obviously, goodness knows what they're trying to do, desecrate Christian holy places.
Yeah, they are Muslims, and they defended their Christian the Christian holy places. And as much as we had also Christian Palestinians standing with us, literally. Not only once, not only twice. Today at Al-Aqsa Mosque, I was told there is a Christian who comes inside Al-Aqsa Mosque every day, and he distributes water and dates for those who break fast. I think this is very, very beautiful. And there's one in Nablus who year after year he distributes water and fresh dates to people who are stuck in traffic, but they still need to break fast. So we stand with each other. Really, the image, it's not anti any particular group. I have said this before. Had the colonial powers belonged to a fourth religion, okay, because it's not about religion. Had they belonged to a fourth religion, then it would be Jew, Christian, and Muslim against the colonizer. In this case,
but what's important here that is often not appreciated in the West, I think, is that it's Muslim Palestinians and Christian Palestinians together who have suffered and are suffering from the occupation. So it's Palestinian Christian leaders, archbishops. I mean, they're very well known, very prominent figures, respected religious figures in the Christian church, who are standing shoulder to shoulder with their Muslim brothers, who are also under the same occupation, over against the Israeli oppressors. So this shoulder to shoulder of the Christian and the Muslim Palestinians is often not understood, particularly perhaps in places like the United States, where many Christians there are very pro-Zionist, of course, and thus anti-Muslim. But on the ground, in reality, it's Christians and Muslims who are suffering together as Palestinians under occupation. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
It's fair in terms of the yes, we both suffer under occupation. We both don't have. So, for example, Muslims and Christians from the Gaza Strip do not have freedom of movement, and there's a system of permits that the Israeli military issues, and you could only come to Jerusalem, whether it's like for during Ramadan, or which coincides, today also with Easter. Also, Christians from the Gaza Strip cannot come to Jerusalem without these permits. So sometimes we will read in the newspapers and the media that 400 Christians were given permits to come from Gaza Strip or less. The same thing applies to Muslims and Christians from the West Bank. Typically, they don't have freedom of movement. There is a solid physical separation wall. There are military checkpoints, and you could only enter through these checkpoints if you have that permit. So if there's no freedom of movement, there's no freedom of worship. In elderly people, beyond certain age, they could come from the West Bank, not from the Gaza Strip, without the permits. Young people they will not be issued permits. So if you say at 20 years old from the West Bank, typically they will not have the permit, which leaves a whole generation of Palestinians who have never been to Jerusalem, though they could be living only a couple of miles. Bethany to the east is only a couple of miles. Bethlehem is only 5 miles to the south. Ramallah is only maybe 7 miles to the north. So we talk about people who could see Jerusalem from specific places, but they cannot come to Jerusalem. So we both suffer under, and also there are laws that apply to both of us, Muslim and Christian Palestinians. If we are Jerusalemites, we have a residency, and we could lose this residency if the center of our life is outside of Israel, according to their legal definition, which means we could lose our identity cards, our residency, and we could end up not living in Jerusalem.
The irony is, any Jewish person who's never been to the Middle East in their life, living in New York or London or Moscow or anywhere on the planet, has a right, in inverted commas, according to the Israelis, to live in the West Bank or Jerusalem by virtue of their Jewish identity or whatever, isn't it? So it's ironic that they have that absolute legal right, apparently, but residents, who've been living there for centuries, can't even go to Jerusalem, can't even go down the road. It's an extraordinary, and the word apartheid has been used in the media recently. It's been thrown around, and it does strike me as an interesting term that might apply to, with the example, the sense that different ethnic groups and communities living apart, but with the dominance and the supremacy of one particular ethnic group over the others, controlling and regulating what other groups can do. The analogy being with apartheid South Africa, of course, where a white minority controlled the majority population. Do you think that's a fitting analogy, this apartheid concept?
It has been used systematically by all those who advocate, or at least they address the issue of the nature of the discrimination against the Palestinians. We have about 50 laws, more than 50 laws really, that discriminate against Palestinians. So if you happen to be a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship and you have a wife from the West Bank, there's a process, a legal process, and they pass laws against family reunification in the Knesset. It's a very tough thing to do, but the notion of someone, a Jew from the United States, for example, even who never set foot in Palestine, has more right. I have a striking example. People do not think so. Usually they don't think of Ivanka Trump. She converted to Judaism. Okay, she did come to Palestine, and for us in Jerusalem, it was not a happy occasion because it was moving the embassy from the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But at any rate, Ivanka Trump, if she decides to emigrate to Israel today, she has more right than I do. I have, my family goes back through and through.
And you of course, are born in Jerusalem. Your family perhaps go back many, many centuries, possibly millennia. And you're saying that this lady, American lady who converted to Judaism, has more right to live in your country than you do. Is that true?
Since you have mentioned being born, I was born in Amman because at the time it was Jordan, and my father was serving in the Jordanian military, and he was in the camp officers. And but 5 of my siblings were born in Jerusalem. I have in my family tree, I have a manuscript, an ancient manuscript, where someone from my family, a Sufi, shows up in that manuscript. So we go back as a family. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how far we can we go, but the idea is that someone who immigrates today has more rights than a Palestinian. So for example, we have
but that's based on race or ethnicity, isn't it? And that's where the whole apartheid thing comes in, because the apartheid system was based on color and race and ethnicity rather than on law and rights for everyone. And that's what strikes many young people, many people in the world now are shocked that this apartheid-like system is entrenched and very much alive and kicking in what is called the State of Israel.
I cannot really say that it's really one pure ethnicity. That's really it cannot be the case but it's a constructed ethnicity.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a constructed ethnicity. So they just put more rights for a specific group, and this is really the problem. They can build. They can, in fact, the Israeli High Court passed a law. They don't pass a law per se, but they have a ruling that if the Israeli army confiscates a Palestinian private land in good faith, that's okay.
In good faith. Well, that's a hell of a horse, isn't it, for anything you care to say it is? Yeah.
The one we are going to say in the face of so they can Land grab takes place all the time, and they put themselves as the judge as to what settlement colony in the West Bank, for example, is legal or illegal. All of them are illegal. All of them are null and void according to international law.
International law. But can you explain this notion of itikaf and why the Israeli forces are preventing Muslims from doing so? What is this idea, and how does it play out?
The original notion of itikaf is that basically you dedicate time. Basically, you have the intention. I'm going to be, for example, in the mosque, let's say from dawn until the afternoon, or from noon until night, or I'm going to spend the last 10 days or the first 5 days, or this night only. And this is practiced all over the world by Muslims. They do what everybody else is doing, except that they don't leave the mosque. Right. And when they don't leave the mosque, it means, and this is an old ruling, if you are in the courtyard of the mosque, you are still in the mosque. If you are even in need of something that you need to get quick, say, for example, I was asked today by someone at Al-Aqsa Mosque who's doing i'tikaf. He's from, a Muslim from a foreign national, and he asked me whether they provide suhoor, food, pre-dawn meal. And I said, of course, there's plenty of food for iftar and for suhoor, but just in case, let's just say that the number of people is really, more than the number of meals people can share. But still, I told him, you can still, as someone who is in a state of itikaf, you can still leave the gate of the mosque to the nearest store, get some food and come back. You are still, your itikaf is still intact. It's not
right.
So you are not going to sleep at a hotel or what have you. That doesn't work. So people do sleep inside the mosque during itikaf. Now, why the Israeli forces prevent Muslims from having itikaf inside the Qibli mosque or any other part of the Al-Aqsa mosque / Al-Haram al-Sharif? Because they did not want to have a large number of Muslims inside the whole mosque when they bring the extremist settlers inside the mosque in the morning. So that's the whole idea. Right. And of course, it's basically dictating things inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. I would like to mention, because I
just say that the Jordanian king is the one who has custodianship. He's supposed to regulate and maintain the safety and the access to that area. But now the Israeli security forces have unilaterally just taken this over in violation of this status quo, this understanding which has been there for generations. So this is seen, and this is a very new thing, isn't it? In recent years, it's not like this is a very recent thing.
The historical status quo, we can go back to 1852 when the Ottomans started talking about this status quo, but that included at the time the Christian denominations inside the at the time when we say the old city, that was the whole city. There was no outside.
Right.
Really. But yes, you are right. And the Waqf department continued to take care of Al-Aqsa Mosque, meaning the Israeli security forces, qua occupiers. Their place was outside the mosque. They have no business being inside the mosque. Whether it's Al-Aqsa Mosque or any other mosque, they have no business. They have no business being inside the church. They have no business. So the Waqf continued to take care of Al-Aqsa Mosque in toto until the year 2000, when Ariel Sharon broke into the mosque with a large number of soldiers and security forces, around 2,000 of them. And that instigated the second intifada, and for 3 years only Muslims could enter. And in the year 2003, the Israeli police unilaterally, changed that much of the historical status quo. They started bringing Jewish extremists, and they took them for the first time all the way to the eastern part of the mosque. So that's what they do. Sunday to Thursday, so on Fridays and Saturday they don't do that, and it's not a sign of goodwill. It's Saturday is Saturday, of course. And the Friday we have a very large crowd inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. So they take them all the way to the eastern part of the mosque. Then they move northward in the direction of the Bab al-Rahmah, the Gate of Mercy, as we mentioned earlier. And this is why the Israeli police would not allow Muslims to pray in that area, while there are Jewish extremists in the region. In fact, today I saw a young man when I went in the morning to Al-Aqsa Mosque. Saw a young man outside the outside gate near Lions Gate, and I asked him, "Were you prevented from entering?" And he told me they meaning the police told him that he could enter after 11:30, meaning after the Jewish extremists leave the mosque. So this is definitely a
violation in violation of the responsibilities and rights to regulate by the Jordanians. And this is, you talk about the extremists. I mean, some people are saying that they're talking of a new far right administration in occupied Jerusalem. Are not the extremists now part of the government in terms of some of the ministers, particularly? I mean, how has this affected things? It's just presumably made it considerably more difficult.
I would say yes to both. They are part of the government. Smotrich, who denies that there is a Palestinian people, though we are mentioned really in hieroglyphic writings going back to the old days of Egypt. We are the Canaanites. We are the Philistines. We are not the same faith like the Philistines, but we have been. In fact, sometimes I begin by speaking about Jericho rather than Jerusalem. It's the oldest known agricultural settlement in the history of humanity until today, 12,000 years ago.
Amazing.
Agricultural settlement, it means that the Palestinians who lived at the time, whoever they were, they knew how to till the land, how to cultivate, how to harvest. And of course, it was like a carbon-14 test, and they knew that it goes back to that time. So we have Smotrich, we have Ben Gvir, who's a convicted criminal. He has 52 on his file with the police. He's a Kahanist from the days of his youth. This is a group that the United States declared as a terrorist group.
So who is he? What position now does this individual
hold? He's the Minister for Security, Internal Security, and the
former terrorist is now the Minister for Internal Security in Israel. Extraordinary.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. So it's, of course, it's surreal. It is surreal. If you give of course, he will basically use an iron fist against the Palestinians. And what we have seen lately is really part. In fact, you will find an article on Haaretz. It's an Israeli newspaper. It does the title of the article. The settlers inflamed the situation. The police gave the spark. Israeli police. So they know it. Everybody knows what's going on. So the bottom line is just it's a mosque. It's going to remain a mosque, and stop messing with the affairs of the mosque. Back outside the parameters, the 144 dunams, outside the 36 acres. Your place is outside as long as the occupation continues. But I hope that, and this also that the international community should also address the larger picture, rather than the
international community. I mean, so far it seems. I mean, I'm no expert. I've never been to your part of the world, unfortunately. But it seems that the Israelis are operating with impunity at the moment in what they're doing. I mean, I'm not aware of any sanctions. I'm not aware of any Security Council resolutions. I know they tried to pass one, but it was vetoed. I think, was it vetoed by the United States? I'm not sure. But it seems that they are getting away with it with impunity from the international community. Is that fair, or am I misinformed, do you think?
It's accurate. It's very accurate. It's just like the international community is tiptoeing around Israel, treating really Israel with silk gloves. Going by the Israeli playbook, even the narrative about what's going on So rather than speaking the international media, even BBC, we talk about the coverage of the most recent raids. Really, you talk about an army attacking those worshippers and creating stories. It's not a clash, because a clash is between two equal parties.
Moral equivalence here between the Israeli occupiers and the Palestinians. It's just a struggle between these two groups. Without when it comes to reporting on Ukraine, though, it's very much, well, we're very much on the side of the Ukrainians. We're against the evil Putin, and you get a very clear moral kind of perspective on the whole conflict. But in this situation, suddenly the moral evaluation disappears, and you have this kind of equivalence, as if they're kind of more or less on the same footing. And that's curious, isn't it? Where you get moral clarity and outrage on one hand, and a complete absence of any sense of what's actually going on. The systemic occupation and injustice, the wider context seems to be completely missing from the BBC and other Western. I'm not saying all Western media do this, but it seems a lot of them are doing it.
It's very insulting to us. You are adding insult to injury if all those who adopt the Israeli narrative, and they do have professional people to advocate their own version of the story, and unfortunately, not only they toe the Israeli line, but you have read most recently that Time magazine intends to have their annual conference at the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem, and I think it's a big shame. Why not have a conference at a Museum of Tolerance? Because this Museum of Tolerance is established on part of the Ma'manillah historical Muslim cemetery. Israeli newspapers spoke about exhuming 400 Muslim graves to make room for a Museum of Tolerance. This is Rabbi Hayer from Los Angeles. It's a shame. They should stop basically using a cemetery for their conferences. They should stop using this cemetery. It's a Muslim cemetery, will always be a Muslim cemetery. This place was tainted from day one. The Muslim families who have loved ones there in that cemetery went all the way one Israeli court after another until they reached the Israeli High Court, and the Israeli High Court ruled in favor of the Israeli municipality of Jerusalem, meaning that they gave the okay to Rabbi Hayer to build his Museum of Tolerance. I think it's nothing but a monument to his ego rather than a Museum of Tolerance.
Do you think recent events, however, will lead or are leading to a shift in global views about this? Do you get the sense that the ground is shifting in terms of the public perception? By public, I mean, of course, the West. Sorry, it's always the international community, by the way, is always America, Australia, Britain, Europe. It's never kind of the rest of the world, like Africa. So do you get the sense that there is a change in perception, or are people just not bothering to take an interest and are just a screen of indifference still?
There is interest, there is renewed interest, and also we see a shift in the narrative, which is a healthy sign. It's a good sign, and the international community is, despite all these public statements that usually call for calm. Usually, of course, we need calm, but we need also the Israeli.
We need justice as well as calm. I mean, how can there be true peace without justice? Otherwise, it just becomes the peace of the graveyard rather than the peace of a healthy, vibrant, just social order.
Allow me, sir, to mention Umar ibn Khattab a couple of times. Once, an emissary, like an ambassador, came to looking for Umar ibn Khattab. This is not Jerusalem now, it's Medina. And he found Umar ibn Khattab sleeping under a tree. And so no guards, and he said 3 words in Arabic. We need more than 10 in English to translate these 3 words in Arabic. He said, عدلت فأمنت فنمت. You must have been just. So I'm echoing basically what you have just mentioned about justice. عدلت, you must have been just. فأمنت, you felt secure. فنمت, therefore you slept like this. What I have noticed around the world, hundreds, if not thousands, of conferences and seminars and lectures about security. Nary a word about justice. If you don't have security, just look at the roots. You have injustice. And this is really one thing. But then I need to go back to Umar ibn Khattab in Jerusalem and his pact with Patriarch Sophronius. I think one of the most beautiful things in the history of humanity, that particular pact. And let's say that Umar ibn Khattab was really shaped as a personality in the school of the Prophet ﷺ. Revelation shaped him. By being with the Prophet ﷺ, that shaped him. By being with the Prophet ﷺ, when the Christian delegation that came from Najran, from south part of the Arabian Peninsula, they came to meet with the Prophet ﷺ, and they met with him in the mosque, and they stayed in the mosque. There were no hotels, no motels. We speak about the Christian clergy staying inside the mosque, and I think this is a very beautiful thing in the history of Islam. Umar ibn Khattab concluded with Patriarch Sophronius that pact, al-Uhd al-Umari, as we call it in Arabic, preserving the sanctity, security of the Christian holy places and the freedom of worship. And after 1400 years, of course, much more than 1400 years, we are still there, both Christians and Muslims. But in fact, we have to speak about the diminishing numbers of Christians in the Holy Land and in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Until 1948, 1947, pretty much the Christians were almost 1/3 of the population of Jerusalem.
1/3?
Approximately. Today they are about 1% only.
1%. You see, under the Ottoman Empire, obviously, when Palestine was part of the empire, Jews and Christians and Muslims lived together, coexisted in peace for literally centuries. I mean, it wasn't just like a few years. And how different is the situation today, where we see this apartheid-like system, we see military occupation and oppression and incursions into houses of worship, churches and masjids, mosques as well. And also you say that 1/3 of the population of Jerusalem, historically, of course, a place of immense importance and significance to Christians because of the life of Jesus and the Old Testament figures as well, now being reduced to just 1% of, as you say, of the population. And that is, an extraordinary change, isn't it, in a matter of just a few years, where the Palestinian Christian population has virtually become extinct in Jerusalem itself, of all places.
In 1996, when Netanyahu was prime minister, there was the so-called leaked report accusing the Palestinians of literally the PLO of being the reason why the Christians are leaving the Palestinian Christians are leaving the country. Professor Bernard Sabella, a Palestinian sociologist, a Christian, a Catholic, in fact, a Palestinian sociologist, he responded to the so-called leaked report, and he said, it's the occupation. That's why people are leaving. And even there are many Muslims who are leaving, but we don't feel it the same way because our numbers are large. Let's not forget that this is the cradle of Christianity. Christianity was born here in, we talk about
literally with the birth of Jesus.
Literally. In fact, this reminds me when we talk about the birthplace. In fact, if you enter through Lions Gate, to your left is the gate, one of the gates that lead to Al-Aqsa Mosque. To your right is Saint Anne, the birthplace of Maryam alayhi salam, and it's a very large complex. And this reminds me of the misleading map of the old city that is given to tourists, as if basically we have 4 well-defined quarters: Muslim quarter, Christian quarter, Armenian quarter, and Jewish quarter. That has never been the case historically. Go through the Muslim quarter, Saint Anne, Church of Flagellation, Church of Ecce Homo, an Orthodox church, the Austrian Hospice. On the other side, you have another Armenian, building. You have many stations of the cross. This, that's not what we believe, but the idea. This is the Christian heritage, and that's in the Muslim quarter. And in the Christian quarter, you will find the Mosque of Umar. That's when we talk about Muslim and Christian rubbing shoulders together. Also, the mosque and church, day and night, they say good morning and they say good night. This is the case in Jerusalem. We have the Holy Sepulchre Church and the Mosque of Umar. In Bethlehem, we have the Church of Nativity and also another mosque of named after Umar al-Khattab, the Mosque of Umar al-Khattab. They also exist basically right there next to each other. In the Christian quarter, you'll have the quarter of Salah ad-Din, Saladin, they say in English sometimes. Yeah. And he has his own zawiyah, very, very small, extremely small room where he would do dhikr. So our history is integrated. Our history is one. We have really, Smotrich said that there's no Palestinian, people. Our history is ingrained not only in the stones of the old city and the rest of Palestine. It's in the embroidered Palestinian dress. It's in our cuisine that they, that they see day and night. It's in our strong social fabric. It's just simply we are together. And I wish basically that this spirit that I'm talking about will be extended to everyone. But let's basically get rid of the of that elephant. We don't talk about the of the elephants in the jungle. We talk about the jungle that was brought upon us, where the law of the jungle really is norm right here in Palestine.
Gosh, that's extraordinary. Well, perhaps we'll conclude here. It's an extraordinary story, and you've only been able to briefly touch on. We've gone from the biggest context, the theology of the land, of the Islamic perspective. And you mentioned ayah of the Quran that actually are relevant to this. You mentioned hadith. You mentioned the Pact of Omar, which I encourage everyone to look into. And then you mentioned the many centuries of peaceful coexistence between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and then we have the tragedy of the occupation, the brutal occupation, which has come to a particularly vicious head in literally in the matter of days ago, and it's still ongoing, where shocking scenes of Israeli occupation forces storming Masjid Al-Aqsa in occupied East Jerusalem. And maybe the difference now is just this, that the world can see this. They can, Palestinians with their phones perhaps, or filming it. We can see it on TikTok. We can see it on Twitter. We can see it on YouTube videos. What is actually happening? No longer is it just your word versus over against the Israeli word about what really happened. Was there any brutality? Was there any attacks? We can see for ourselves now, and I have seen for myself, exactly what is happening. And the appalling, as I say, brutality, which would be, if it happened in the streets of London or Paris or, Washington, there'll be a national outrage. There'll be the government itself would be quaking and oh my goodness me, this is a scandal. But no, as you say, there have been words of concern and, imploring peace from various governments, but it's still going on and nothing has changed. But the difference I'm hoping is that because the world now has a window onto this, in a way it hasn't had before, through social media, that this will change minds and hearts, and people will actually really get to grips with the situation of the Christian and Muslim Palestinians in the occupied territories of your country. So do you have any final words before we conclude, perhaps?
Yes, my final word is a message of of gratitude. Of course, thank you for having me. And my message to Muslims all over the world, that your first qibla, because Muslims prayed in the direction of Jerusalem for 16 or 17 months, and it's our first qibla, it's our first direction. So our first qibla is our first concern. If you have missed the opportunity to come to Jerusalem, to Al-Aqsa Mosque this Ramadan, and it's not only during Ramadan, please plan that you will come. Don't postpone it until Ramadan next year. Just make sure that you come time and again. I know people, especially from London, Jazakumullah khairan, they come to Jerusalem. And today I could see basically groups from the UK and from South Africa and many other places from Europe as well. but the largest so far groups systematic, they come from UK. Continue the good work, but I hope that every Muslim will make a commitment, an internal commitment, the intention to come to Jerusalem. You'll be supporting your Palestinian brothers and sisters, and not only Muslims. Many hotels in Jerusalem are owned by Christians. Come fill these hotels, support the economy, and as I said earlier, you return home as ambassador of goodwill, inshallah.
Inshallah. Oh, that's a wonderful final message. Well, thank you so much indeed, Professor Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway, for your time, your expertise. I know you're a busy man, you're a very distinguished scholar, and so thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Yeah.